American Psycho is a novel written by Bret Easton Ellis, first published in 1991. It tells the story of Patrick Bateman, a wealthy and successful investment banker in New York City during the 1980s. The novel is known for its graphic depictions of violence and sexual content, as well as its exploration of themes such as the excesses of capitalism, the emptiness of modern life, and the nature of identity. The novel received both critical acclaim and controversy upon its release, with some praising its satire of the yuppie culture of the 1980s and others condemning its violence and explicit content. It has since become a cultural phenomenon with numerous adaptations and references in popular media. In addition to the novel, American Psycho has been adapted into a feature film starring Christian Bale as Patrick Bateman, as well as a stage musical and a television series in development. Despite its controversial nature, American Psycho remains a seminal work of modern literature and a cultural touchstone of the 1990s. Patrick Bateman is a wealthy and successful investment banker living in New York City during the 1980s. On the surface, he appears to have it all: a prestigious job, a lavish lifestyle, and a stunning fiancée. But beneath the surface, Patrick is a deeply disturbed and violent man. As the story unfolds, we see Patrick's descent into madness. He becomes obsessed with material possessions and maintaining his impeccable image. He spends his days working out obsessively, shopping for the latest designer clothes and frequenting expensive restaurants and nightclubs. But it's not enough. Patrick's need for control and power begins to manifest itself in horrific ways. He begins to fantasize about murder and acts out his violent urges on those around him, including homeless people, prostitutes, and even his own colleagues. Despite his increasingly erratic behavior, Patrick manages to keep up appearances with his friends and colleagues. But as the body count rises and the police begin to investigate, it becomes clear that Patrick's facade is starting to crumble. Throughout the novel, Patrick grapples with his own sanity and the question of whether or not he is truly capable of change. But ultimately, his obsession with control and violence consumes him, and he becomes a true American psycho. As the novel begins, we are introduced to Patrick Bateman, a 27-year-old investment banker who works at Pierce & Pierce on Wall Street. Bateman is consumed by his own narcissism, constantly comparing himself to others and obsessing over his appearance and material possessions. He frequently engages in acts of sadism and violence, torturing and killing people for pleasure. Bateman's life is filled with superficial relationships, both professional and personal. He has a group of friends who are all successful and wealthy, and they spend their time going to fancy restaurants, clubs, and parties. However, beneath the surface, Bateman is filled with an intense rage and a sense of emptiness that drives him to commit increasingly heinous acts. As the story progresses, Bateman's mental state deteriorates further. He begins to hallucinate, seeing his victims come back to life and taunt him. He becomes obsessed with a rival co-worker, Paul Allen, whom he murders and dismembers. He also has a sexual encounter with a woman named Christy, who later becomes a victim of his violence. Despite the gruesome acts that he commits, Bateman is never caught by the police. In fact, many of the people around him simply ignore or dismiss his behavior, as they are also consumed by their own materialistic desires and superficial relationships. However, as the novel draws to a close, Bateman's grip on reality slips completely, and he is left alone with the horrific consequences of his actions. One of the central themes of American Psycho is the emptiness of modern life and the impact of consumer culture on the human psyche. Bateman and his friends are all successful and wealthy, but they are also deeply unhappy and unfulfilled. Their obsession with appearance and material possessions serves as a way to fill the void in their lives, but it ultimately leads to their destruction. Another key theme in the novel is the nature of identity and the question of whether or not people are capable of change. Bateman grapples with his own sanity throughout the story, but he is never able to break free from his violent impulses. The novel raises the question of whether Bateman is truly a product of his environment, or if there is something inherently wrong with him. In conclusion, American Psycho is a harrowing and disturbing novel that explores the dark side of human nature. Through the character of Patrick Bateman, Bret Easton Ellis portrays the shallow and destructive nature of consumer culture, as well as the fragility of the human mind.